And the first item that I want to deal with is in relation to correspondence received from Rachel Downs, Chief Executive Officer acting of Carranua, who is calling for alleged defamatory and untrue remarks by a member to be withdrawn. The correspondence states that the complaint relates to contributions made by Senator Paul Gavin in the course of the committee meeting on the 15th of November 2018. And in her letter, Ms Downs is requesting that those remarks are publicly withdrawn by Senator Paul Gavin and that she receive a public apology for the false and defamatory allegations made against her. I have examined the relevant portion of the transcript from the meeting and the remarks noted by myself at that time also. And having given the matter consideration, I am of the opinion that Ms Downs' request is reasonable. Therefore, I'm going to call upon Senator Gavin to withdraw the utterance without qualification. We have discussed the issue with Senator Gavin prior to this meeting. So, Senator Gavin, can I come to you, please?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, last week I received information about an incident involving a client at Carranua that was of sufficient concern that I believed it should be raised within the committee meeting with the department. While I believe the matter should be further investigated in terms of what took place that day, I am not in a position to state that it was the CEO who was involved. Therefore, I withdraw my comments for last week with regard to the CEO, and I apologise unreservedly.
Thank you for that, Senator. And just to advise the members that the Clerk has drafted a letter to go to Ms Downs, and Senator Gavin has agreed to the letter, which will go on behalf of the committee, acknowledging that the comments should not have been made and that Senator Gavin has issued a public apology. Thank you for that. And now I propose that we suspend briefly to allow witnesses to take their seats for the engagement on the uptake of apprenticeships and traineeships. We will suspend for 2 minutes. Thank you. Because, as we know, the mobile phones do interfere with the sound system and they make it difficult for the parliamentary reporters to report in the meeting, and also television coverage and web streaming will be adversely affected. So we've reached item number 6 on our agenda, engagement with stakeholders on the uptake of apprenticeships and traineeships. So the purpose of this part of the meeting is to resume our engagement in relation to the uptake of apprenticeships and traineeships. We had the opportunity to engage with 4 different sets of stakeholders last week, and it was certainly very informative and very interesting. So it's good to have the opportunity to have 4 more individuals representing their august bodies today, and we already agreed that we would have some written correspondence from some other individuals as well. On behalf of the committee, I wish to welcome Peter Davitt, who is the CEO of FIT Limited, Tony Donoghue, Head of Education and Social Policy with IBEC, who has come to us on a number of occasions. You're very welcome back, Tony. Dr. Philip Smith, who is the Head of Shannon College of Hotel Management, and Nessa White, the relatively new General Secretary of the Education and Training Boards Ireland. And it's our first opportunity to be able to wish you well in your appointment, Nessa. And we did actually, in your absence, when Michael retired at his last occasion to be here, wish him well in his retirement and wish you well. So it's nice to have the opportunity to do that personally and publicly. The format of the meeting is that I will invite all of you to make an opening statement, maximum of 3 minutes, and that will be followed with engagement with the members of the committee. But before we begin, I do wish to draw your attention to the fact that by virtue of Section 17(2)(l) of the Defamation Act 2009, witnesses are protected by absolute privilege in respect of your evidence to this committee. However, if you are directed by myself as Chair to cease giving evidence in relation to a particular matter, and you continue to so do, you are entitled thereafter only to a qualified privilege in respect of your evidence. You are directed that only evidence connected with the subject matter of these proceedings is to be given, and you are asked to respect the parliamentary practice to the effect that where possible you should not criticise nor make charges against any person, persons or entity by name or in such a way as to make him or her identifiable. I also wish to advise you that any opening statements you have made to the committee will be published on the committee website after this meeting. And members, of course, are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice to the effect that they should not comment on, criticise or make charges against a person outside the House or any official, either by name or in such a way as to make him or her identifiable. And I would now like to call on Peter Davitt to make the opening statement on behalf of FIT. Peter, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity you have given FIT to contribute to your review. FIT is the coordinating provider of 2 ICT apprenticeships for associate professionals in software development and network engineering, respectively. We were successful in the first call for submissions, and you might think of us as a good case study of the challenges and opportunities that can arise in expanding apprenticeships into sectors and occupations where there is no tradition of apprenticeship. FIT was established in 1999 to promote an inclusive smart economy. Its board members are senior executives in leading tech sector companies. Over the last 20 years, in collaboration with FOSS and VECs and laterally SULAs and ETBs, we have assisted 18,500 job seekers access quality ICT training, of which over 14,000 have secured employment. The majority of these candidates have not been third-level students, much less graduates who study STEM subjects. Prior to the first call of new apprenticeships, FIT had piloted a new dual education 2-year training programme called ICT Associate Professional at NFQ Level 6 FET in collaboration with the Department of Education Skills, SULAs and 8 ETBs. On this precursor to the tech apprenticeship, 259 candidates were sponsored by 143 companies, with 85% of those completing securing employment. In collaboration with Intel and KWETP, FIT also designed and ran a new Advanced Manufacturing Maintenance Technician programme at NFQ Level 6. Over 80% of those who completed the programme had secured employment in Intel and a further 10% elsewhere. The majority of these candidates had no previous knowledge or experience in the discipline, further demonstrating how FET can cater for highly technical roles. With the support of KWTP, the capacity of the programme has now since been doubled. In the light of this background, FIT welcomed the development of national policy on apprenticeships and traineeships, the establishment of the Apprenticeship Council, and the creation of QQI quality and programme validation processes for apprenticeships. In tandem with the first call, FIT developed 2 ICT apprenticeships to meet the skill needs of employers while making tech employment more inclusive. The positive response we have got from IT employers led us to adopt the goal of achieving an annual intake of 1,000 ICT apprenticeships by 2021, to expand the portfolio of tech apprenticeships into complementary areas such as cybersecurity, fintech, DevOps, virtualisation and digital forensics. There is strong employer demand in Ireland for ICT skills. It is a demand not just for high skills, but for intermediate and social professional skills that are well within the capability of appropriately designed FET programmes. In periodic ICT skills audit based on face-to-face interviews with IT employers, FIT has consistently found that the majority of posts they were seeking to fill required an exercise of skills at levels that companies described as entry or competent rather than expert. While employment of ICT practitioners is concentrated in our 4 largest cities, there are now growing pockets in every region, some of which have grown particularly rapidly. To ensure the shared ambition for modern apprenticeships becoming a key source of talent acquisition for employers and an option of choice for many job seekers, it is FIT's view that there are aspects of the current programme needing attention and enhancement. Namely, existing administration process for the new apprenticeships need review to ensure fitness for purpose. A national and persistent promotional campaign needs to be implemented immediately to ensure broad appreciation of the range of apprenticeships now available and in development, with a particular emphasis to encourage more women to consider the opportunity. And finally, the adoption of funding models which more effectively support the early stage development and implementation cycle of new apprenticeships and take account of the diverse needs that pertain across sectors. In conclusion, while early take-up may be challenging, requiring a change in mindsets, more ambitious targets for the expansion of new apprenticeships are necessary to sustain job growth in Ireland's buoyant economy through a broadening of talent pipelines. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. And I now move to Tony Donoghue, Head of Education and Social Policy for IBEC.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks once again to the committee for this opportunity. While I understand that the committee is concerned about uptake and the reputation of apprenticeships amongst young people and their families, the main focus of my opening remarks is the take-up of apprenticeships by employers. Employer buy-in is critical as the apprenticeship and traineeship models depend on employers taking on apprentices. I don't underestimate the challenge of shifting attitudes in a society that still defines educational achievements in terms of CAO points and directs entry to higher education. However, I am convinced if we could offer real alternatives to ambitious and capable young people, and most critically, real progression opportunities up to advanced degree level through apprenticeships, attitudes could be changed. Apprenticeships would no longer be second best options. It's almost 6 years since IBEC was invited to participate on the then government's review of apprenticeship in Ireland. At the time, it was felt that the apprenticeship system, which was limited to 26 craft-based occupations, didn't reflect the broader needs of the Irish economy. The review suggested a new model of business-led apprenticeships that could boost skill levels across the economy and help to get people into quality and sustainable jobs. A lot of effort has been put into the new apprenticeship project to turn this aspiration into a reality. IBEC has at times been frustrated at the speed at which the new apprenticeships in particular have come on stream. But in retrospect, this probably shouldn't be a surprise. This is a major shift for businesses in how they recruit and train people, and for the education system in how it delivers programmes. We've submitted a detailed submission to committee members in advance of this hearing on how we think that the number of new apprentice registrations could be significantly increased. As you heard at last week's committee meeting, registrations are a year behind schedule in terms of the targets set out by the action plan to expand apprenticeships and traineeships 2016 to 2020. Our recommendations can be grouped around 3 main themes: marketing, support for employers hiring apprentices, and governance and streamlining the new apprenticeship approval process. As you heard last week, the apprenticeship campaign has already made significant progress in raising the profile of apprenticeships with key stakeholders such as guidance counsellors, learners, business and the media. However, a targeted campaign on the value proposition of apprenticeships for firms is needed. SMEs and owner-managers are a particularly difficult business segment to address in terms of expanding take-up, but they're incredibly important. They tend to be time-poor, they have limited numbers of staff to support apprentices, and may not even themselves be aware of how the potential talents delivered through the apprenticeship system could improve their business. A major obstacle to the expansion of new apprenticeships, particularly SMEs, is also cost. There is strong evidence that the cost of paying a salary and subsistence while the apprentice is off the job becomes a major disincentive. Our submission includes a case study which demonstrates that the total cost of a newly recruited apprentice manufacturing engineer is about 90,000. Therefore, we believe that the cost of funding new apprenticeships off the job wages plus travel and subsistence costs where necessary should be supported through the National Training Fund. This would also address the anomaly whereby similar costs for traditional craft apprenticeships are subvented. I now wish to address the issue of governance and streamlining the approval process. The landscape around the development and promotion of apprenticeships is very fragmented with a lot of actors. These include the Department of Education and Skills, SOLAS, the Higher Education Authority, Quality and Qualifications Ireland, 2 apprenticeship advisory committees, education and training boards, higher education institutions, multiple industry groups and trade unions. This can lead to disconnections and delays, and we believe that time has now come to consolidate these different elements into a dedicated agency working with business consortia and education providers to oversee the funding, development and promotion of apprenticeships. The new apprenticeship project has also been developed under the legal framework of the Industrial Training Act 1967. At one level, it is testimony to the amount of goodwill that exists towards apprenticeships in the system, that any new apprenticeships have been delivered through a 40-year-old legal framework that was designed for a different industrial era. All the legal requirements in the 1967 Act around protections, rights and responsibilities of apprentices and employers are still valid. However, other requirements have made the development of new apprenticeships and registering of new companies a bureaucratic process. This can be seen in the 12 steps that are actually laid out in the apprenticeship plan. The government committed to an overall development to roll out of 12 to 15 months. This hasn't been achieved, and in some instances, proposals that were approved after the first call in January 2015 haven't come on stream. This is a major challenge around keeping companies who originally expressed interest in the apprenticeship project engaged. Given the constantly changing business environment and skills requirements, the system needs to respond more swiftly. Having said all that, I'd like to finish off by acknowledging the progress that has been made and stating that business remains firmly committed to the apprenticeship project. It is actually gaining some momentum, I feel, and if we address some of these outstanding issues, it can be significantly scaled up, deliver new opportunities for young people and improve the competitiveness of Irish business. Once again, I thank the committee for this opportunity and look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. And I now move to Dr. Smith, who's the head of Shannon College of Hotel Management. And I understand, and I just want to clarify for the members, that Shannon College does not operate apprenticeships per se, but they do operate placements as part of the working programmes, and very successfully too, I know from experience. And the committee, while we are examining apprenticeships, we are interested in all forms of training, and particularly on the job training. We felt it was important, particularly with the challenges facing the hospitality industry, that we would have the opportunity to talk to yourself. And also the fact that you are involved in world skills. We did have a presentation from the young people who represented Ireland last year, and we were all very, very impressed with them. It's definitely something that we want to pursue and to support. So, over to you.
Thank you. I would like to thank the committee for the invitation to submit. There are 3 headings: why a contribution from Shannon College, the reasons for low uptake and recommendations. Why? Shannon College, NUI Galway, is very successful in educating leaders for hotels and hospitality. It recruits high-calibre candidates to Level 8 programmes, retains them, equips them with professional, business and life skills, places them in the workplace and ensures that they're employed when they graduate. Its alumni have been very influential in hospitality and tourism. Its founder, Dr. Brendan O'Regan, was told in 1951 that there were not jobs for 12 qualified hoteliers in Ireland. Shannon College now has 500 students. Its comprehensive placement programmes promote strong links with the employer and a deep understanding of skills requirements. We attract significant numbers of quality applicants for the hospitality sector, which traditionally is not well regarded by such influencers as career guidance counsellors and parents who have negative perceptions about work-life balance and the abilities required. Why low uptake? First, hospitality. The availability of labour for tourism and hospitality tends to be counter-cyclical in all developing countries. While very hospitable and friendly, our history makes us uncomfortable with service, my own personal opinion, and therefore there is a widespread underestimation amongst the general population of the level and range of skills required in hospitality, and more importantly, the opportunities. During the recession, tourism was recognised as a pillar of the economy. Perceptions improved through such initiatives as the Gathering and the Wild Atlantic Way. Irish people who previously would not have considered tourism as a career started to work in hospitality. Unfortunately, this is now being reversed, with admissions to all hospitality programmes declining. There will be at least 60,000 additional jobs in the next 10 years. At the tourism conference in Killarney 2 weeks ago, they were talking about 80,000. And industry practitioners are pessimistic about filling them domestically. Exacerbating this outlook is the fact that the provision of apprenticeships in hospitality is weak. In Ireland, the prestige of apprenticeships has definitely declined. There is still great respect for the tradesman, the expert, the artisan, but it has been overwhelmed, as IBEC have said already, by the ever-present media, public and private discourse on points, CAO deadlines, college places, change of mind dates, accommodation and so on. In Switzerland, 2/3 of 15-year-olds enter apprenticeships which are highly valued in society. If one of our graduates who would have been placed in Switzerland wants to go back to be a manager in Switzerland after they have graduated in Ireland, they must go back to the beginning of the apprenticeship system. Recommendations. State-funded research is required into attitudes to apprenticeship to inform a long-term marketing strategy. This strategy, with a strong message around words like expert and others I have mentioned, should include the use of schools liaison officers, which has been very successful, you will see from the main submission in Shannon College. Consideration should be given to Level 8 apprenticeships, if only to address the negative educational perceptions of the overall apprentice scheme. We feel that Ireland should host World Skills as soon as possible to boost the image of apprenticeships in the country generally. We think that leaving certificate subjects and curricula should be evaluated to see to what extent they can lead to apprenticeships, both in terms of motivation but also content. It is strongly recommended that there is a separate subject in tourism and hospitality be offered. And just to go back to my main statement, and I think I have a few seconds, it's amazing that in the current business studies programme in the Leaving Cert, there is no hospitality or business section, while 1 in 9 of our population, the working population, is employed in hospitality, and it is a pillar of society. And lastly, there is an urgent need for the development of a comprehensive suite of apprenticeships in hospitality. I would, however, recognise that this is very difficult, and 2 very good chef trainee programmes at level 6 and 7 have been developed. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Philip. And Nessa, now we ask you to take the floor.
Thank you. On behalf of Education and Training Boards Ireland and the 16 ETBs that ETBI represents, I am most pleased to be given the opportunity to make this statement to the committee. ETBs are statutory bodies which have responsibility for education and training, youth work and a range of other statutory functions. ETBs manage and operate second-level schools, further education colleges, community national schools and a range of adult and further education centres in communities throughout Ireland. Since the call for apprenticeship proposals by the Council in 2015 and subsequently in 2017, ETBs have actively engaged in expanding the range of apprenticeship offering within further education and training sector in collaboration with industry and working closely with SOLAS, the Apprenticeship Council and other stakeholders, whilst continuing to deliver craft apprenticeship training nationally. The Commie Chef Apprenticeship was rolled out in Kerry in quarter 4 of 2017 with 125 apprentices registered. This included 104 participating employers. The Auctioneering and Property Services Apprenticeship was rolled out in Dublin and Cork with 52 apprentices registered and 40 employers participating. And then the Butcher Apprenticeship was recently rolled out and registrations are ongoing for the 2018 uptake. The OEM Engineering Apprenticeship was validated recently following an engagement with QQI and is preparing for the rollout in Cavan Monaghan and Limerick Clare ETBs. The remaining 5 new industry-led apprenticeships are in development and preparing for submission to QQI. Since 2016, ETBs have been actively engaged with industry partners with 24 new traineeships introduced to date. In 2016, 4 were rolled out in hospitality, as mentioned by Philip, engineering, interior systems. In 2017, an additional 6 were introduced in animation, certified accountancy pathway, digital sales and marketing, and engineering operations. Hairdressing and lab assistants were also covered. 2018 has seen a significant increase with 14 new traineeships rolled out, with another 10 planned. So whilst the uptake of people participating in new apprenticeships and traineeships is lower than projected, several factors need to be considered to understand and inform the current challenges. So in summary, the SOLAS authorised officers appointed in ETBs need to continue to reflect the expansion of the apprenticeship model and the requirements to engage and support the employers. The ways of attracting, incentivising and supporting employers who employ and train apprenticeships needs to be considered further. ETBI will continue to work with SOLAS, the Apprenticeship Council, the Department of Education and Skills and other stakeholders to enhance the marketing and promotion of apprenticeship and traineeship at national level, as mentioned by previous speakers. ETBI really acknowledge the importance of career guidance to empower young people to make well-informed and sustainable educational choices. In addressing some of the challenge, we plan to host a learner-centred further education and training conference to create awareness and understanding of the options and career pathways to work-based learning opportunities for learners, their parents and career guidance counsellors. And I can confirm that in engagement with the IGC, the Institute of Guidance Counsellors, the 11th of December will form the first opportunity for CPD to take place with a number of stakeholders for the guidance counsellors, which should start to address the challenge there. Continued resourcing of the FET sector in terms of recruitment and retention of suitably qualified staff and access to state-of-the-art training facilities is critical if ETBs are to continue to support work-based learning in the 21st century. In conclusion, ETBs have been and will continue to work collaboratively with industry partners, SOLAS, QQI and other providers, and we have a leading role in the provision of cost-effective, off-the-job training to apprentices and trainees across a wide range of career areas in communities where apprentices and trainees reside. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Nessa. I'm going to go to the members now, and 3 members have indicated initially. Deputy Naughton, I'll go to you first.
Thank you, and thank you all very much for your excellent opening statements. And I suppose I take the very clear message in relation to, I suppose, the mindset and the cultural shift that's needed. And I take note of Dr. Smith's, your request there for a state-funded research in the area. When have you had, I suppose, one-to-one engagement with the apprenticeships, people who are on apprenticeships, and what you're hearing? What are from talking to some of them myself, some of them say, well, we don't have a lot of money in our pockets, a kind of disincentive. And I suppose this, again, we come back to the cultural shift of what it is it may be to be seen as an educational process, and then eventually, you're in a full-fledged career. Just to hear what the blockages are on the ground. It doesn't have to be scientific, from the apprentices who are going through your own systems. And I do think as well, I think the need for role models and people to go into schools, to not just the career guidance teacher, but somebody who can walk into the school and say, look, this is my career. I didn't maybe like school. I was into X, Y, Z outside. I was more into the crafts industry or whatever. And I know I take your point as well in that we have the tradesmen, or the tradeswomen, we should say now, which is seen as the more popular ones, and we need to start opening up the apprenticeships and opening up, I suppose, the possibilities for young people. And I think that's an important side where you get the role models coming into the schools. So just from your own, I suppose, experience, what are they saying, the apprentices themselves, in relation to the blockages and that cultural shift? I think that's a key point for us here today, that mindset that we need to overcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Just for clarity, I'll take 3 members, go back to the panel, then I'll take 3 members. Deputy Martin.
Thank you, and thank you very much for coming and sharing your insightful presentations. I have a couple of questions in relation to upskilling in the energy efficiency sector. First, I know unless at Waterford Wexford ETB are developing an NZEB sector of excellence, and Limerick IT have worked with them to develop the training content programmes that upskill electricians and plumbers and block layers and so. I'm just wondering, would you be able to comment on this specific project, and are there other ETBs looking to take it up? What are the learnings from this in terms of making sure their investment in apprenticeships recognise the need to shift to this new green economy and the job opportunities that would provide? And do you need supports to deliver these programmes? Are you getting enough funding? Are you getting enough supports for this shift that's needed to the green economy? And I know that it's been said that many people that work in renovation and retrofitting and energy efficiency or the new green areas are actually trained abroad. So what has been done at a regional level to upskill and support the retrofit sector through the ETBs, and do you have a policy in that area? In general then, just on the gender balance issue for the fast track into information technology, your submission includes a recommendation for women in apprenticeships campaign, and I'm just wondering what would that look like? How do you imagine it could be done in both the IT sector and on a wider level of apprenticeship take-ups? Something I mentioned last week, do you think there's a need for some sort of incentive, something like the Athena Swan Award equivalent for institutions and businesses in this area? What do you think of that as an idea? What actions are being taken in light of the fact that just 2.75% of apprentices declare a disability? So what are we doing there? Peter, I think you as well said that you used the term decommute. Just wondering, could you elaborate on that, and what would make this concept so attractive to employees and employers alike? And finally, Philip, I think you're wondering about the tourism and hospitality subject for Leaving Cert. Isn't that a subject on Leaving Cert applied? Tourism and hospitality, or something very similar to that? I'm just wondering, has there been a review of that and how it's successful, and if it is successful as a Leaving Cert applied subject, could that help in persuading them to put it on the Leaving Cert curriculum as well? And is there any uptake in the sector then as a result of that as a Leaving Cert applied subject? Thank you.
Thank you. I did have Deputy Byrne, but he's just stepped out, so Senator Byrne is actually next.
Okay, thanks very much indeed, Chairperson. To thank the four presenters for their very informative opening statements. The first thing I'd like to raise is to do with, and I know it came up here last week as well, I suppose it's the disparity to do with female take-up, to do with apprenticeships, because it is a huge issue, and I know that there's a very small percentage. And I did refer to the fact that we had a skills day and apprenticeships day, and it was in Limerick in the Midwest there last week, and it was very good to see so many young females coming along, that there is more of an encouragement, but certainly how do we get more to participate? So that's my first question. In terms of employers, I suppose there's no incentive sometimes for them to take on people as apprenticeships. I know that the employer pays PRSI, they pay the different SEERs associated with taking somebody on an employment, and they give somebody very good training, but at the end of the day, if they could get some form of maybe tax relief or you know, some sort of an incentive, and just if anybody has any comments around that. And I'm very aware to do with Dr. Smith, to do with the shortage of skills in terms of the hospitality sector, and I know, as you're aware yourself, that I come from that background, and certainly I know while it's great to be able to get hotel managers, it's the lower down staff is the biggest problem. And also in terms of, I know that there was a loosening of visas and that in terms of employees in the hospitality sector from the Department of Employment and Skills, and certainly, you know, if maybe just a comment around whether there's more of that needed. And I know that last week I accompanied some hairdressers to meet Minister Halligan, the Minister for Education and Skills, in relation to the fact that they're facing now the increase in the VAT, but they're taking on it goes back to my point that there's no incentive for employers, that they are taking on people, but they're not getting anything on the other side, and then people are being skilled, and a lot of the time they're walking out the door at the other side. So how do you keep people, I suppose, engaged in where they have, or even a certain amount of engagement for a while, to, you know, to give, that the employer feels at the end of the day. I just think that employers feel very disenfranchised, that they're training people and then they're losing out at the other end. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Senator. I will go back to the panel now, and then we'll have the opportunity to go to the other members and to come back again. So, Nessa.
Hey, thank you, Chair. Just to respond to the what are the students saying piece, and I suppose when I took up the post on the 1st of May, it was something I was really interested in and something I'm very focused on listening to. So for our conference in September, we invited a female apprentice plumber to speak and tell her story. And such was a success, to be honest, that we have engaged with one of our ETBs who have in Kerry, who do video and do excellent work on that, and they're actually going to make a video of her telling her story. So the female piece is something that I'm certainly very driven by and focused upon in acting upon it. So Ailbhe Lacey was an example to all of us as to what you can do. And she did tell her story that really school was kind of for her. Then she tried air hostess, and then actually came back to working with her dad as a plumber. So it's stories like that she was a cool, trendy young girl who made apprenticeship look cool and trendy. And that's some of what we need to do to change the culture and the conditioning. The other piece I'm really focused on is the engagement with parents, to be honest, because we know that the parents are where, whether you get the encouragement or not, is at home predominantly. And I take your point, liaising and informing guidance counsellors is a really key part, but I think we have to focus on the parents piece as well. So that's something that we're focused upon. In terms of making it a viable option, again, the marketing piece that we're all invested in. Solus certainly, and many of the partners are very focused on this. It is about hearing the employers who are saying there's no return on investment for this. So it's about addressing all of those in the communication piece. Again, on the role model, I think about why ETBs are different, and I think about the Suzuki garage I passed this morning, and I heard the story from the girl, a female apprentice mechanic who went to an ETB school out the road in Carnew. She wanted to do an apprentice mechanic, and she couldn't get any employer to take her on. And the principal of the ETB went from employer to employer until she succeeded. And she's now an example for us in Gorey of somebody who the linkages are there. And I think that's where, as ETBs, we have that strength. So that's probably something I'm really focused on, really aware of. And I think you're dead right. The only difference is to tell the story. How do we make it different? How do we make it look like a viable option and get to the parents and get to the students? And that's where we're focused upon.
Thank you, Nessa. Yes, Peter.
So just, Deputy Naughton, on the point of in terms of blockages for me and role models, it's a very, within the tech sector in particular, it's a very complex issue because there's such many stereotype misnomers. We hear that a career in the tech sector is you require a degree or a master's, and you must have STEM subjects, and to even enter into the sector. So that is a deterrent from many people, both female and male, in terms of accessing that. So for me, there's a much bigger issue here: our obsession with third level. That our children must go to third level. And if you don't take the route of third level, you're a second-class citizen in some respects in terms of access to training. What I want to say, first and foremost, from my perspective, what we need to get across, first and foremost, that for level 6 for me, for example, in FET, I call it the forgotten certification. It's the forgotten award. A level 6 award is above an honours leaving cert. It's equivalent to a diploma or an advanced certificate. If you build course and curriculum to that level of standard with the right content, the demand for jobs across industry sectors, not just the tech sector, but right across the industry, is phenomenal. And the interesting, I think, what we've done from a FIT perspective over the last number of years, we've undertook a number of skills audits because my board is major tech companies in Ireland. Why aren't they engaged with FIT? They engage with fit in terms of accessing skills. But we had to go out and ask employers what did they want. And in the early days, it was all, well, it's degrees and masters. But when we were actually able to show them what can be delivered through a level 5 programme and what could be delivered through a level 6 programme, there was a change, the scales come off the eyes to a certain extent. To the extent, for example, our tech sector is buoyant at the moment and growing. There is job opportunities for many more than those who perceive themselves currently having roles within the tech sector. And the interesting thing is, I think there's a growing awareness amongst the tech sector that if it doesn't diversify in terms of recruitment pipelines, it's going to really, really struggle into the future. There's also, I think, a real genuine desire within the tech sector now to address the issue of diversity and to increase female participation. But we have to make it attractive. We have to make, so for example, if you go the route male or female in terms of FE, you're seen as an equivalent competent individual as somebody who takes the route of a third level qualification. And I think their essence of it, thereafter we have to definitely profile role models. We have to also get across to people that the tech sector or jobs in different parts of the industry are just sitting in front of a computer. But the whole idea, I think, of having regular demonstrations of the variety of cohorts that come into the sectors is very, very important. But first and foremost, we have to get parity of esteem for FET provision. And the interesting thing from my perspective in working with companies is we've won that argument with companies. They now want to access. I mean, we're getting real traction for the tech apprenticeships. But where we need to win the argument is with young people, learners, and Mammy Daddy Ireland, that this is a credible route to a good career for their son or daughter.
Campaigns needed.
It's a persistent, it's more than a campaign. It's, first of all, as I say, this recalibrating, not recognising different routes of education and learning. I am actually a product. I'm a bricklayer. I started off as a bricklayer. That's where my confidence comes in the apprenticeship programme. The best way to learn is learning by doing in the guise of an expert. And that's what ultimately what apprenticeships try to deliver. So, but I think we have to collectively address this imbalance of perception of the value of one level of provision as against another level of provision. We have to then show, I mean, you know, there is opportunity, for example, on the new apprenticeship website to profile more careers that are more exciting and more, that can attract a variety of different people into it. But I think there's a policy issue here. There's a communication issue, and then it's creating appropriate progression pathways. And I think one of the points made earlier on, we have to have a much more dynamic career guidance delivery. A personal experience, my own daughter 2 years ago, she was in 6th year, doing the Leaving Cert, went to the parents-teacher meeting. There was no conversation beyond third level. How might you get to Trinity? How you might get to DIT or DCU. There was no conversation about FET provision, PLCs, or anything, and there was definitely no conversation around apprenticeships as a route. Now that is in modern day Ireland. That fundamentally has to be addressed to get parity of esteem.
Okay, thank you. Philip.
Yeah. Chairman, I think the importance of the Leaving Cert, there is a Leaving Cert applied which is really, really very good. But in every family in Ireland, the Leaving Cert is key. It's discussed by all the kids coming through. It's a factor in everybody's life. All the mammies, all the daddies are talking to each other. It's there constantly. It's an institution, an intangible institution in all our lives. And you can do all the marketing you like, and a lot of marketing has got to be done in targeting, but you've got to change perception. And I think that if tourism and hospitality was a full subject in the Leaving Cert, it could take 20 years. But gradually people's perceptions will change. People will start to succeed, get good marks. It could be one of these things that everybody's doing because you get a higher mark. Or, you know, it doesn't really matter. But the whole point is it becomes something that's acceptable, and it becomes a subject for public discourse at the family level and at every level. And then I think the same can roll on then to apprenticeships. That in some way, and I'm not in any way expert at this, but in the whole design of the Leaving Cert, the different subjects, that the technical, that the skill element of thing, like in Switzerland, is being emphasised all the time. So that's why I think the Leaving Cert is important. It's just so central in our culture.
Okay, thank you, Philip. Tony.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with everything that's been said, and I don't propose to labour the cultural shift that's required. Just a couple of issues, though, on female participation. What we have is occupational segregation. I mean, apprenticeship is just a way of learning, and the low female participation rate reflects the trades where apprenticeships exist already. And where we have, and that's why the new apprenticeship project is so important, the most successful new apprenticeship so far is the insurance apprenticeship from the Institute. 60% of those apprentices are female. The second most successful one is the one run by Accountancy Technicians Ireland. 60% of those apprentices are female. IBEX Biopharma sector launched a laboratory technician apprenticeship 2 weeks ago. Again, females are outnumbering males on it. So as the occupations evolve, I think you'll see more female participation. I think there is a specific issue around the involvement of girls, particularly in STEM subjects and, you know, the technology-related, the engineering-related subjects. And that, I think, has been covered by previous speakers in terms of role models and that kind of thing. And I think has already been covered well. I really wanted to address Senator Byrne's issues around the companies and incentives for companies. And why would companies, when they might see their apprentices walk out the door? Well, there's an old saying about, you know, can employers afford to invest in upskilling? And my response to that, can they afford not to? I mean, they've got to do this. And we've actually got a great window of opportunity now because they're screaming out for skills across a whole range of occupations. So this is a window. This was a much more difficult conversation 5 or 6 years ago. I think, particularly with small firms, we tend to decide, build it and they will come, which doesn't happen. I mean, your average small firm, they think of two things. They think of where are the business opportunities and where are the business threats. They don't think of skills even very conceptually. They've got business challenges. And I think there's a missing piece in the jigsaw demonstrating how upskilling more generally, but specifically bringing in apprentices or providing opportunities for trainees, could actually bring a business dividend. And Enterprise Ireland have got 1 or 2 tools that they're running through the regional skills fora. I think that requires really serious ramping up. That initiative of, it's basically skills needs analysis service. I think there's more basic stuff that needs around, I mean, the SOLAS document, new document, Pathways to Apprenticeship, talks about a new portal where employers can advertise their apprenticeships. My only question there is, why is it taking 5 years for that to be there? That would be a basic requirement. Okay, people like FIT or the various consortia are marketing their apprenticeships, but we need a place where if a company is prepared to offer an apprenticeship, they can offer it online, and young people and their families can go and access and apply online as well. It's a fairly basic requirement. In terms of support for costs, I wouldn't think tax relief, just because of the complexity of it, is necessarily the way to go. Our ask on this is actually far more modest. It's just that the apprentices off-the-job wages, in other words, when they're in a college training, and any associated travel costs, they will be picked up by the state through the National Training Fund. That's what happens with every other type of apprenticeship. Because we've met some resistance, again, particularly from small firms who just see this as a cost in a way that maybe some of the bigger companies don't. And I think even that adjustment would make a lot of difference. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to go back now. Do you want us just clarification?
Yeah, well, my questions weren't answered.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and
okay.
just to say to Dr. Smith, I wasn't questioning tourism and hospitality being placed on the Leaving Cert. What I was wondering is, because it is on the Leaving Cert applied, is it successful, and could that be used to strengthen the argument to roll it out to Leaving Certificate? So I wasn't saying, I'm in agreement with you, and I'm wondering, is there some way that
well,
the Leaving Cert...
Well, it is, because we offer places outside the traditional CAO route, and people do come in with having scored very highly in the applied tourism and the applied leaving cert in all subjects, but in tourism. So it's a very good route. And those people go on to get their degrees and so on. So yes, it's a good way of going, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, Nessa, you want to come in then on the particularly the questions around retrofit and all that area?
Absolutely, yeah.
Thomas, I'm letting you in next if you if you to go.
No, I want to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I had taken note of the fact that I hadn't answered you, Deputy. Yes, so last Tuesday, I suppose, really good evidence of why going out to meet people in the ETBs is really good. And I was invited to Waterford Wexford ETB to a gathering of their staff, and it was on their strategic plan. And I learned of the NZEB initiative and the Centre of Excellence approach. So what I can say to you is, yes, that is at very final stage of development. The learning that we can share across the sector is where ETBI come in. And so that is something that in the structures we have, so once a month we have directors meetings where the Director of FET, who's leading on that initiative, will share that learning or that project with all the other 15 directors from their ETBs. So that's certainly something that will be focused on. There is no policy in place as yet in that area, not a national policy, but it's certainly something that's on the agenda. And the other initiative that we are currently engaged in is we are working with SEAI on the retrofitting of schools. And I suppose the evidence that we will get from that will inform training that will be developed from ETBs or by ETBs on areas like retrofit, and that gap that sometimes is there where they may not fit into a niche programme that exists at the moment. So to answer that the link with what we're learning from the engagement with SEAI on the retrofit of post-primary schools is something that will inform training into the future.
And do you intend to roll out a policy? I just think the ETBs
Yes.
could have a crucial role here in moving towards a green economy. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I suppose my learning from the engagement with SEAI was how challenging the targets are for us to meet in our post-primary schools, and in meeting those needs by developing training that will address that is something that we absolutely will include in the policy. So yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to go to Deputy O'Sullivan.
Thanks very much. I think a lot of the questions have been answered, or asked and answered already, and I'd like to welcome all of you. But I suppose the general big thing that's coming across is the importance of awareness and the importance of the status of doing an apprenticeship as opposed to higher education, etc. But it strikes me as well that we were all of us currently in the room, were all at an event this morning which was a photograph of the women members of the Oireachtas, and past and present, and it is essentially about the visual role models, if you like, and Nessa talked about the young plumber, and you've talked about, Tony talked about the fact that there are a lot of women in the new apprenticeships, but we do really need to see them. We actually need some. I know that there is this Generation Apprenticeship campaign, which is around kind of the awareness and so on, but I'd be interested if you have any other ideas on how that can be done, because I think that should be a central point in our report, because it came up so much last week and it's coming up so much again this week. And I think in your answers there, Peter talked about the importance of awareness for young people and their parents, and Tony earlier on talked about awareness for employers as well. So it's on both sides that we really need to see this awareness. So I suppose my general question is around, what can we do in relation to that? And the other issue that's related to that is about the status issue. We talked about the league tables last week and the newspapers that publish league tables, and this is the most wonderful school in the world because they had 100% went on to higher education. I spoke to somebody who was here last week actually about the fact that I think there are some efforts being made to the newspapers concerned to actually get them to broaden what they measure, including apprenticeships. So I was going to ask Tony directly if IBEC might join that campaign to get a broader definition, because I'm sure IBEC are very powerful with all the media, etc. And indeed, all of you in your various roles, and us as a committee, that because as long as your school gets the top grade because it sends everyone to college, then they're not going to send anyone to do an apprenticeship, or they're going to look down on the person who actually wants to do an apprenticeship. So I think that's really a big barrier at the moment to getting that. parity of esteem, if you want to call it that. And I just, Philip, if I can just ask you something, I think you said that entry to colleges in relation to the hospitality sector was declining. Maybe I misunderstood you. But just if you could clarify that, because obviously the hospitality sector
across the whole.
That's
Is that it? Okay, thanks. I assume Deputy Byrne is coming back at some point, but I just have a few questions myself, some general ones and then one or two specific. Just looking at the fact that we have almost full employment now in the country, is that having a negative impact in terms of attracting prospective students to apprenticeships and traineeships? And also, just again going back to that whole issue of parity of esteem, if apprenticeships and traineeships were properly promoted, and I think we all agree that that absolutely needs to happen, and they were expanded to include level 8 and above, do you think it would become a more viable route then, particularly maybe for students who do want to have a degree, but obviously it's more beneficially financial? They may be not in a financial position to be able to go to college, but if they could find the way, a pathway, that could really work. Then in terms of just a few specifics, Peter, just in terms of when you established FIT, what are the major changes that you've seen since 1999 in terms of the employment sector? And I know you state that you have adopted the goal of achieving an annual intake of 1,000 ICT apprentices by 2021. How close are you to meeting those targets? And are there any particular issues or challenges that you're coming across that you'd like to see reforms in? Tony, you mentioned legislation, and we spoke about this briefly last week as well. Do you think that a consolidation or an updating of the acts governing the apprenticeship scheme would make it easier at the end of the day? Would it make it a more attractive option, particularly for employers? Because while we're trying to attract young people to go into apprenticeships, we're also trying to attract the employers. I think that's keen. And following any possible changes to the relevant legislation, to the acts, do you think that a standalone agency would be warranted for apprenticeships and trainee schemes? So would you see a change in it? Philip, you were talking about if a Shannon College graduate wants to be a manager in Switzerland, they have to go back to the beginning of the apprenticeship system, despite having one of the best qualifications in the world, which Shannon College is absolutely renowned for. Do you think that the introduction of the QQA Amendment Bill, which is aimed at facilitating the introduction of the International Education Mark, would help that? So we would have a situation where qualifications here would be recognised internationally. We certainly would see it as something that would help. As I mentioned earlier, we met with the Irish participants of the World Skills Final last year, and we were very impressed, and you're advocating that Ireland would host that, and indeed we advocated that when we met the group as well. Maybe you might just outline what advantages you would see for the hospitality sector if that was the case. You also mentioned in your submission about having special sections in TY year around apprenticeships. I think that is absolutely key, that during the TY programme, if we can, because most students have at least 3 work experiences, if we could really try to get to a situation where one of those could be something in the sector would be really good. Nessa then, and I'm conscious that the ETB do a lot of work in this area, and Peter was given the example of KWETP and Intel earlier on, which is great, and I think it would be great to see, and I'm sure there are other partnerships like that we could see rolled out. Do you think there's enough access to state-of-the-art training facilities and equipment to support learning? And would you, or indeed would anybody, be aware of really good practices abroad? Because part of what we want to do as part of this committee is to look at practices abroad. I've heard of some particular, there's a particular place I think outside Amsterdam where they've set up nearly a small village, and it's all based around apprenticeships, but people can come in and, for example, they can stay in a hotel, they can have their food there, they can, you know, and then other people not necessarily stay there can bring in pieces of equipment that need to be worked with or whatever. So it seems to be a really, really good model of attracting people and showcasing what it is about. Also, what supports, Nessa, do you think that the ETBs need to enable them to have a more effective role in the promotion of apprenticeships and traineeships, and what incentives would you suggest to encourage more participation from employers? Because again, it's about incentives and supports for the employers. So they're mine. So no St. Thomas, but we are joined by Senator Gallagher. Have you any questions?
With the contributions from your questions, Chair.
Well, this is the last round.
No,
you
I'm
say?
okay. I've covered.
You sure?
I'm quite happy. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so I'll come back, Peter. Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. I might start with the second question, the major changes since 1999 in terms of our experience of the tech sector. And how I probably describe it is the head and the heart. In the early days of FIT, because I mean, FIT's DNA is in creating second chance opportunities, reskilling opportunities in terms of people securing jobs in the tech sector. And I had to say, probably in the early days of FIT, you know, 1990, 2000 plus, you know, companies engaged with FIT probably more from a CSR point of view. You know, it was good corporate social responsibility, and we might gain one or two candidates through that process. Over that period, almost 20 years, we've seen a total transformation. We are now a talent acquisition pipeline for the tech sector in Ireland. We're on the radar for most companies as part of their recruitment initiatives and strategies. Why? Because we've demonstrated the currency and calibre that FET to level 6, 5 and 6 can deliver. And in the end, companies aren't preoccupied with credentials. They're possessed by competencies. They want people to have the skills to do the job in question. And interestingly, most industry certification that's in demand within a lot of companies that we engage with would be the equivalent to FET level 6. So we've won that argument, if you like. And as I said, going back to my earlier point, we now have to win that argument with the broader population in terms of Ireland, in terms of seeing this as a credible or an equal route to a professional career. So that's the fundamental change, how I see it. In terms of the take-up and full employment having an impact, I have to say, in our own recruitment process, we're not seeing that as an issue currently. I think for a variety of reasons. First of all, I mean, in some tech-related courses within third level of provision, you know, you've up to 70% dropout. You also have a huge cohort of people who, for one reason or another, can't progress and access the route of third level education, and then are hungry to find an alternative route in which. So when we look at the cohort of people who are coming into currently for the apprenticeship programmes, their age range from early 20s right up to the mid 30s and the 40s. There are people who've had work in industry before, are reskilling or upskilling. There are people who have been participated in third level for a period of time for one reason and another wasn't able to continue. There are people some people have already got degrees, and other people then are what I call tech enthusiasts. And then another cohort are foreign nationals who have skills in this area but are not recognised necessarily. So we've got actually a very rich cohort of people in terms to draw from. The challenge is, you know, we don't want to put anybody forward for an apprenticeship programme who won't be successful. So we have to do a fair bit of assessing and screening in advance. And there is issues, like, I mean, some of the fundamental issues that we mentioned earlier, you know, there's promotional, but there's also administration challenges that are slowing up the process of apprenticeships, and funding still has not been resolved in terms of FET apprenticeships for this year or next year. We are fully convinced, and we're committed to delivering 1,000 tech apprenticeships by 2021. That is a decision made by the Board of FIT, and we believe we can deliver that. We hope to have 250 up and running by March next year, a further 400 by December next year, and we believe then, if the system and needs that need to be addressed are put in place, that is a very realistic. We also have engagement from the civil service, who are looking at this as a credible recruitment stream into their needs as well as a talent acquisition pipeline.
Okay, good. Thank you. Tony.
Thank you, Chair. Just comment first of all on Deputy O'Sullivan's comments on the school league tables. I agree. I mean, if I could find a way of, and it's definitely something that's worth pursuing. There's such a crude measure of achievement, and And it's not just actually around apprenticeships. I mean, there's so many other aspects, as you would well know, to the education experience and the development of the young person that go well beyond CAO points. So, I mean, a metric doesn't come to mind at the moment, but I definitely would think it's worth pursuing as an idea. In terms of, look, we're talking a lot about status here. If some of the companies on Peter's board, which are the top global companies in the world, are prepared to offer apprenticeships, those apprenticeships will have status. I mean, the brand that these companies bring. And if they think it's the way to go, and similarly in the pharmaceutical sector, we're seeing some household names taking on apprentices. I mean, all the other stuff has to happen, all the other marketing, etc. But I remain convinced that, and I suppose we can only do so much, but I think if we could just target the companies and get them to offer these apprenticeships, it would be time and resources well spent. In relation to your own question, Chair, about the impact of full employment, I don't think it will have a huge adverse impact. I'm just looking at the registrations for what we call the traditional apprenticeships are actually ahead of target, and that's predominantly in the construction sector. And noticed today that the CSO figures are showing a 3% increase in overall employment quarter on quarter, quarter 3 2018 to quarter 3 2017. And most of those jobs are actually coming out of the construction sector, and obviously we need them. So they're going in the right direction. Our main blockage is on the new apprenticeships, and that's probably not a surprise because the construction sector for the last 40, 50 years have been using apprenticeships. That's part of their culture. That's their way of doing business. So we're not breaking new ground here, whereas with the new ones we are, and I think, and this brings me on to your third question, actually, the consolidation of the legislation and a standalone agency. There have been process delays in approving and rolling out these apprenticeships. And I can remember when the first call was made in 2015, there was a lot of companies expressing a lot of enthusiasm and energy around this. Kind of 3 years down the line, some of them are still waiting. And I think in terms of amendments to the legislation, it's, as I said in my opening remarks, it's not about the contracts of apprenticeship in terms of the protections for the apprentice and the responsibilities of employers. That's fine, and you know, I wouldn't change a word of that. It's around the process of registering companies and improving industrial sectors. I think the people, in fairness, within the system have push this to the boundary. For example, there's a requirement that the Sulis board would approve a new industrial sector. Now, they have, when asked, they've put that through in jig time, you know, so it hasn't been an impediment, but it shouldn't be there. And look, last week you heard the chair of a standalone agency called SkillNets and what they're doing in terms of upskilling. Now, it's a different product, but they're dealing with 15,000 companies, and they have 50,000 people, employees that take part in their programs. Now, a lot of them are shorter programs, shorter interventions, but that's and they've got to meet their metrics, and but it's a very efficient system. Now, whether you wrap this into an existing agency or create your own agency, I'm always very loath to suggest the creation of another Quango, to be honest with you. But I think we probably do need something that's dedicated, because apprenticeships are along the fault line of further education and higher education. And we still have a very siloed education system. We talk about progression, but there tends, in the reality, there's a bit, but we're getting better. I have to put that out there. But still tend to go in parallel tracks. And, you know, the advanced apprenticeships are funded by the HEA. The SOLAS are funding the up to level 6 apprenticeships. And there's just disconnections there. And I would prefer to see a stream of money, and there's a significant amount of money, by the way, 120 million have been allocated to apprenticeships this year. Incidentally, only 13 million of that is for the new apprenticeships that we've spent a lot of time talking about. I would prefer to see a single agency managing all of that and promoting it. I think it was something that was alluded to in the original apprenticeship review group. It talked about plural arrangements. I think we're probably moving to the time when we need to set that up. And finally, in terms of advanced apprenticeships, I'm often accused of aiding capture by the higher education of the apprenticeships, because I talk so much about advanced apprenticeships and the requirement for degree apprenticeships, master's apprenticeships, and indeed we've got a PhD apprenticeship under development. I don't think there'll be huge numbers, but the fact that it's there puts out an important message. It's not because I think that that's going to be the education experience for everybody, but that progression opportunity needs to be there. And that's how you address this status. Somebody who starts at a level 5 or a level 6 may not want to go to a degree, honours degree, master's level, but the fact that that progression route is available addresses a lot of this status challenge that we have. So I'll leave it at that, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Philip?
Chair. First of all, Deputy O'Sullivan's question, overall within the CAO system that we would be aware of at level 6, 7 and 8, there has been a decline, first of all, in general applicants to hospitality-related courses in general across the ITs and the university sector with us in NUI Galway, and that transferred through then into numbers actually coming in. Now, we were reasonably well protected in Shannon because our numbers had gone very high, and we still have the interview, and also we had a lot of our applicants will be in the first, second and third preference, so a lot of those would hold. But also talking, as I did in the last week or two after I got the invitation to attend, to some of the people in the training centres, finding it more difficult to get people to join excellent courses, and even, you know, talk within the IT, and it's only anecdotal, but of thinking about closing particular programs because the applications aren't there. And that's just in hospitality. To go on to talk about the educational mark, the way we would see that most is it's of huge benefit to us in our international marketing. The point we would make about Switzerland is that for them it's a philosophical thing. You know, if one of our students goes back maybe to work in a hotel in Switzerland, maybe even for personal reasons, they will find it extremely difficult to progress on the management side, because they don't believe, first of all, in people moving very fast. They want their skills really, really embedded, and they don't want to see their own apprentices being outstripped by people who haven't done the same basics. And they don't have a problem with that. I think one of the comments I made in my main submission was that, you know, meeting with Swiss business people, they will often boast about the actual skill that they still possess. It might be something in IT, it might be woodworking, could be anything, but they actually still hold that in great respect for themselves and other people. On the world skills, I think from an employment apprenticeship point of view, having the world skills come to Ireland, it'd be a little bit like getting a World Cup in sport, that you would have it protracted for 8 or 9 days, constant competition, 60 different skills, every conceivable kind of skill, gold medals being awarded, constant razzmatazz, and that has to make an impact on young people, particularly if we use it properly and projected it through the media and so on. In the case of transition year, Our university had been doing taster days for a while for all programmes, and we introduced it for our programmes. And basically what we do is, normally during study week, when our lecturers aren't teaching, we invite schools to bring in groups of transition year students, and we give them a taste of the whole programme. So little time in the kitchen, little time in the restaurant, but we'll also bring them into the business subjects, a little bit of accounting, a little bit of economics to give them an overall feel, and maybe a little bit of a fun element of it as well, and a little present going away and so on, just to make them think about other things. And my last point would be on the idea of the school's liaison officer. Back at the start of the boom, as we were moving into 2003, 2004, we had become very successful in international recruitment, and all of a sudden our Irish numbers started to decline. And we thought about it a lot, and we went with the idea of schools liaison officers. And we have always used our own graduates, young graduates who have actually worked in the industry, and it has been immensely successful. And coming from hospitality, it was actually sometimes difficult to get into schools, to get into some of those schools that are at the top of the league tables. But when we actually got in, our schools liaison officers were very good. They did a good job. They motivated people, and the schools then started to invite us back, and we started to develop a relationship with the schools. And in that way, I think the overall ETB programme for developing apprenticeships, if you could get into schools and actually bring in qualified apprentices, people at different stages who can talk about their experiences, and young people relate to that, you know. So that would be the point.
Yeah, thank you. Nessa.
Thank you. To address Deputy O'Sullivan's questions and comments, I suppose it's really important to acknowledge and welcome the support the committee is intending to provide in terms of the league tables. As you're familiar with in your time in education, it's something that we have grappled with for a long time, because it doesn't reflect the breadth of what we do. And as Tony said, it's about the education options. You know, it's much broader than just going to college, so we'd absolutely welcome that. And it's been an area that's been fought a long time by the sector in terms of challenging the content and the formula that's used. In terms of the young females piece, we've talked about it at length, and I totally agree. And I suppose it's really good to have sessions like this where I'm going away with actions from today that are things that ETBI can do in collaboration with partners, but also things that we can do. Philip has just talked about something I'd written in terms of an action, the TY programme. Why in our schools, over almost 300 schools, don't we have that as something that we can do? So that's not waiting for anyone else. So that's really positive for me from today. At that 6-month point in the job, it's always good to have things to focus on for the next year. To address your questions, Chair, ETBs have been fully supported in the provision of whatever has been required to have state-of-the-art training facilities. Sometimes there are challenges around planning permission, change of use if the premises is found, but in the main that hasn't been a difficulty when the case has been made within the appropriate parameters. That's something that has been very forthcoming, and our engagement has been very positive on that with Solas. In terms of the supports that ETBs need, I suppose it's probably timely to bring us back to some of the points that we made at the outset. The role of the authorised officers is crucial to the continued and future expansion of the apprenticeship model. In talking to colleagues on the panel before today and again today, that role can sometimes be the area where we have some delays, because if the expansion continues to grow at the rate we want it to, we need the authorised officers to grow in terms of their numbers as well. When we look at the recruitment of suitably qualified staff and retaining the staff, sometimes the challenge can be for ETBs in an area where you require an expert to deliver the programme. The salary scale sometimes, when we're back in the good times, and for any time, but certainly when people can be employed in their trade or in their area of expertise, attracting and retaining the qualified staff is an area of challenge for us. You then asked about the employer incentives, and I suppose it's important to highlight the current supports and incentives that we would provide in terms of working with the employers. They may not always be monetary, but sometimes the supports that are provided, like we have a centralised unit in ETBI that provides support on the assessment, the development of curriculum, and we have a mentor training initiative where we liaise with the employers, because all of this is new for the post-2016. So that's something that we continue to work on and continue to build upon, and have had some very positive feedback and have learned and amended and adapted what we've done. And I suppose the final point is on the strategic partnerships that we talked about, and on changing the culture and the conditioning that we have had to date on the apprenticeship model. I think the engagement with THEA, who were here last week, and ETBI, and us collaborating on those strategic high-level initiatives, that we can make this a pathway, that the choice is there for people. So it becomes seen as, you know, the option that can lead you to anything is possible, right up to the PhD. So that's something, again, I think we can engage on, we can collaborate on, and it's something that the partners right around this sector are open to. And as Tony said, while sometimes challenging because we want to keep our own patch and we want to keep who we have, I think it's bigger than that now, and there's a requirement for us to look wider than that. Thank you.
Thank you, Nessa. If Deputy Byrne or Senator Gallagher wanted to make a comment.
I just want to thank the contributors, because we're currently looking at policy proposals, and there's a lot here, so I don't really need to ask questions, but there's a lot there. And certainly the issue of legislation has been brought up today and at the last session as well. I think that's important.
Thank you.
Just briefly to compliment the people here today, and the people that were there the last day as well, for their contributions as well. It's been very thought-provoking. Clearly the one thing we all agree on is that there's enough other work to be done in this area, and it's vitally important we do it sooner rather than later. So it's important that we take all your thoughts here today, and indeed the previous day, and put them together. So I thank you again for your
Okay, thank you. Okay, well look, I would like to just conclude by thanking all of you for coming today, for giving us your submissions beforehand, your opening statement and your opening statements today. It's certainly been it's been inspiring actually, listening to all of you, and I think we're very conscious of the level of work that is needed from our perspective as well as legislators, having an interest in this area. So we will be taking the opportunity to looking at the recommendations, and I want to thank you all particularly for the recommendations, because it's really good to get good practical suggestions, and we'll have an opportunity then to present to the Minister and to the Department, and we may have an opportunity to initiate a debate within the Dáil Chamber in relation to it. So just once again, thank you very much for your time and for your contributions and your insights. You are the experts in the area. We're just learning and trying to put a framework around possibly what's needed and make those recommendations. So as there is no other business, this meeting of the Joint Committee is adjourned sine die. Thank you.